face of my conscience.
August 31st, 2024. If it's 7 o'clock on Saturday morning, it's time for This Week in Waukesha on WAUK 540 AM and the Civic Media app. I'm your host, Downtown Donnie Brown, coming to you live and local from the office of former Alderman Don Paul Brown here in the WAUK studios in downtown, right around the corner from Theodora Yaumans Park, where we are proud to honor our suffragette heritage here in the Shaw. And always very timely with this intro, given that we have there's 50 elections going on around the country this year, as this morning's guest will speak more about. But first, some very, very local news. Football, Friday Night Lights last night. The Black Shirts of Waukesha South lost a nail-biter to non-conference rival Watertown, 34-32. Boy, what an exciting game. The sophomore diaper dandy quarterback, Jordan Garcia, threw for at least 3 touchdowns, I believe it was. Ran for 1, or maybe it was 2. But and then the general, Zayas DeWalt, had, I believe it was like a 70-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, doing some beautiful zigzags. And it really was a crazy, crazy night. And the beloved North Stars of Waukesha North lost a tough one against former Classic 8 and forever crosstown rivals Waukesha West, 35-14. That was at Waukesha North. And then Catholic Memorial beat Sun Prairie West 35-0 in their home opener. So as of this morning, all 4 teams are 1-1, and they'll be entering conference play next week. Now, for you Black Shirts fans, and that includes me, it's going to be Thursday Night Lights next week. They're as a way to honor their inaugural game in the new Parkland Conference. Or they're new to the conference. Parkland's been around. That game will be on Thursday night against Tosa West. So mark your calendars accordingly. And I know there's so much going on this Labor Day weekend, but for all you high school football fans and you South fans, keep that in mind. So this morning's guest, I am proud to have all the way from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, Deanna Troust of Truth in Common. Deanna is an award-winning strategist with over 25 years in multicultural social change communications. She's had leading roles at Vanguard Communications and 2 successful entrepreneurial ventures. As founder of 3 Stories Communications, Deanna was a pioneer in bringing communication strategy to the inclusion, organizational development spaces, and has led dozens of cultural assessment and strategy projects, both solo and in partnership with leading D.C. area firms. And as a consultant with Mission Partners team, she learned about the mis, dis, and main information education by working with the research community and pro-democracy initiatives and efforts to save local news. She's here this morning to talk about a new nonprofit she started actually a couple of years in the making, called Truth in Common, which delivers very unique workshops on just that, helping people and communities address disinformation and just building a more social discourse based on respect. And as I mentioned, there's more than 50 there's more than 50 countries holding elections in 2024. I'm sure there's hundreds here going on. And so Truth in Common is a nonpartisan nonprofit supporting democracy by spotlighting election-related disinformation and helping our communities deploy an evidence-based technique called pre-bunking. Deanna, good morning. How are you today?
Hi, Don. I'm pretty good. That was a pretty good overview and a longish bio. So thanks.
Yeah, well, thanks
everyone for their patience.
I took it all from your website there, and obviously very impressive resume. But full disclosure, Deanna and I also grew up in Orchard Park, New York, in the same town, and have been friends since middle school, and had some great experiences working together in student government, among other things. And really proud to see all you've accomplished throughout your career. Cornell educated too, so I know that my family had some had some part in that. So
absolutely everything to do with it.
So
Don's sister was the reason that I went to Cornell, because I went once to visit and visited someone who was completely freaked out by the academics. And I said, that's not for me. I want to have some fun.
Yeah.
And then I went back with Don's sister, who, worked at the local pub and, took me to a mixer. And I was like, okay, this is for me. So I'm forever grateful, because it really has made a huge difference in my life.
Well, that means a lot. Great to hear. So tell us about Truth in Common. Good open-ended
Thanks
question.
so much for, yeah. Well, sure. It's all good. It's always the opener, right?
Yeah.
Thanks so much for showcasing us here today. So Truth in Common is, as you mentioned, Don, a nonpartisan nonprofit that does media and information literacy education, largely with adults, although we're sort of setting up our first school-based project as well, with a school hopefully in New York City.
Nice.
I say media and information literacy and there's a bunch of different terms in that space, but we do our education primarily through libraries, where the notion of information literacy is sort of at the core of what they do, connecting people with the information they need to live their lives, whether it's, with quality news sources or municipal sources of information, or, whatever it is. So that's why I sort of say that compound term, media and information literacy. But we do it a little differently in that we often title our events with disinformation right in the title there, because these are terms, mis and disinformation, even malinformation, as you mentioned, are terms that people are sort of head scratchers for people, but they're also really concerned about, not being able. I mean, so many people come in and say, I don't really know who to trust anymore. I don't believe anything anymore. I mean, that's a real sad state of affairs. And sometimes I bring the book 1984 to say, this is really, wave it around and say, this is really the path
How
that we're
pervasive
headed
is
down,
it?
where,
Yeah.
Rewriting history, people being, the oversight being such that people aren't free to have respectful and open conversations, these kinds of things. So we can't really have that. So that's sort of what the initiative is about. And I can tell a little bit more about what the workshop series looks like and how I kind of came to this.
Yeah, that would be great. But real quick, cutting back locally, there's new playground builds going on at Bethesda Park and Waukesha Springs Park. And you could help. If those parks are near and dear to you, you can volunteer in putting the playground together. For Bethesda, it's Thursday, September 5th and Friday, September 6th. And for Waukesha Springs Playground build, it's Friday, September 27th. And these, I was involved in a playground build, although I wasn't there that day, regretfully. When I was at Alderman, we had one in Priedemann Park. And it is very much the closest thing in Waukesha you'll come to an Amish barn raising. Obviously not as maybe elaborate or real intricate in the work, but in terms of community building, it's just a great experience, because you're getting involved in especially for young parents, you're putting together something that's going to be a fixture for your children in those formative years, and for your neighbors and friends. And it's neat to see our parks are still very central gathering places. So, and speaking of gathering places, yeah, Dan, tell us a little bit more about the workshops. I had the honor, and thanks for inviting me. It was more than a year. It was about a year ago, and it was a virtual one, and it involved people that we grew up with, as well as people that Deanna knew from different circles back in the Buffalo, New York area where we grew up. And but tell us a little bit more. And you also did one overseas in Germany too. So go ahead.
Yeah, I did some work with the German American exchange program that I was affiliated with, a fellowship program where it was Buffalo, sister cities with Buffalo and Dortmund journey. And that was really in the pilot phase, where I was developing the curriculum and sort of testing it out. And so it's evolved a lot. And obviously it's a very fast moving space. So it evolves pretty much every day and every time I deliver the workshop. But what it really looks like is the kind of signature Truth in Common workshop is a 3-workshop series, about an hour and a half each time. Again, mostly through libraries, but can be community organizations, really whoever is curious about this. And in the first workshop, we really dig in on what is disinformation, really getting to this notion of pre-bunking, which is sharing falsehoods sort of in advance in a respectful manner and a relational manner, so that people kind of know what to look out for next time something similar rolls around. So what we do is share sort of examples of mis and disinformation. We share the tactics that folks use when there is bad intent, which we use that word disinformation to mean when people are sharing falsehoods with some kind of malintent, whether it's to confuse people, create chaos in our spaces, make money for their political agenda. So we share a lot of examples. We explain the difference between those terms and also the tactics that those, that are not sharing things innocently use, like setting up bot farms and doing kind of faulty research and then, taking that at face value, those kinds of things. So that's the first session. And then the second session, we dig into when I was doing work in the local news, kind of restore local news space. It just sort of hit me like a brick that reconnecting with your local sources of news and information is not only supportive to the sector because local news is declining as a sector overall at a very rapid pace, but also is sort of an antidote to mis and disinformation because we get more connected to what's going on at the community level. We become more connected with our community, our friends and neighbors. We follow what's going on at the State's House, et cetera. So I basically do a deep dive in whatever community that I'm into that local news ecosystem, and then platform a local reporter and have him answer questions or her answer questions from the group. And then the third workshop, we get into civil discourse, where the group sort of curates issues, based on some of the falsehoods that are coursing through our spaces. And then we get into a little role play where we have dialogue about them. And I share a ton of conversational tips, even little things that we can say in conversation now. If somebody sort of lofts a supposition into the conversation and you don't necessarily agree with that, or you feel like it's not accurate, what do you do in that moment? And that's really where that's probably the biggest thing people want help with.
We're going to learn more about Truth in Common from our guest and their founder, Deanna Troust, as well as we're taking your calls on the Civic Media app. If you don't have it downloaded already, it's really easy to do. Plus so much more here on This Week in Waukesha on this beautiful Saturday morning, August 31st.
Share it out, yeah. Help who you can. I know that you can. Talk about it, oh, give it up.
The world is waiting for the sun rising. My heart is calling you.
You're listening This Week in Waukesha with your host, Downtown Donnie Brown. And my apologies, I did not introduce my faithful companion producer, the mighty Max Martinson, at the beginning, but he's here now. How you doing, Max?
I am doing fantastic.
Terrific.
Had a little bit of engineering stuff this morning with Deanna on the StreamYard this morning, but we got it figured out.
Love it. And later on in the show, we're going to ask Max going to be working Labor Fest, which will be visited by, I believe, Vice President Kamala Harris. So, but put a pin in that. I, of course, want to give a big shout out to that the maker of that second song, Waukesha's favorite son, Les Paul. And I had his picture in this morning's post on Facebook, an old picture from his younger days, and it looks like he's doing something. He was, in addition to basically inventing the electric guitar and revolutionizing music, Les was also a luthier. Deanna Troust, my guest, Truth in Common. Can you tell me what a luthier is? I just learned this recently. So
I absolutely cannot, but I bet you'll share.
He is one that a luthier is a person who makes or repairs string instruments. So I know a luthier down in Evanston, Illinois, where I used to live. Charlie Madigan, a retired journalist for the Chicago Tribune, very dear friend, and we're going to have him up here or call in to talk about because in his retirement, that's what one of the things he really enjoys is fixing or remaking old guitars, and it's he puts it a lot on Facebook, and so it's great to follow that. But that would be a great show in and of itself. Then we'd have to have you back on for that one, Deanna. So, but
or my daughter, who's a guitar player, and should follow him.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my pipe dreams is having a Les Paul Guitar Town USA festival here in Waukesha. So we'll keep you posted on that. We may even need your help and your daughter's help. But and it's based on a festival in my grandmother's hometown in Ireland called the Willie Clancy, which attracts people from all over the world that are passionate and want to learn more about playing traditional Irish music and the various instruments. And the fun part about it is all the impromptu sessions, music sessions that take place in all the pubs. And I kind of have a vision for that for Waukesha that could also turn into like a world music party. So more on that as
Say the word, we'll
as
be
we
there.
develop it. That sounds great. So we were talking about the workshops, and I wanted to. You mentioned one of them. Maybe it's the third one or second, where there is a local focus on what's going on locally and how you use local resources to prepare for that. And I love that, and it's usually in this segment when I talk about acting locally and thinking globally. And here's a golden opportunity because again, Deanna and I grew up in the same town, Orchard Park, New York. It's a historic town like Waukesha. Was founded by Quakers in 1803. And even though the Quakers were all but disappeared, there was a real theme in that town. It was a very New England style village, a lot of old houses, a lot of beautiful architecture. And our high school had the Quaker theme, but there was a certain, that attitude about being more accepting or welcoming or friendly, like that part of the Quaker mission, I think still manifests itself to this very day. Is that fair to say, Deanna? I know you probably don't get back as much. I know I don't, but.
I know. No, similarly, because my parents had moved away, but I actually hadn't thought about that in a while. The fact that we all kind of grew up surrounded by this kind of culture of nonviolence and inclusion and non-judgment. And I think a lot about what sort of influenced my path, and that had to be part of it. It's a great point.
Yeah, and
I remember touring the cemetery at the meeting house.
Yeah.
A friend of ours' father is
right.
buried there.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it had a lot to do.
I definitely believe that. And but then here in Waukesha, it's you'll find a lot of New York themes here because like a lot of Wisconsin communities, it was founded by settlers that came from upstate New York that had more available space and more available opportunity to build their lives. And so like Waukesha had a Springs era in the late 19th century. We have a lot of beautiful remnants of like beautiful resorts and everything. And because people used to come from the deep South, and there's a big mural here that says Saratoga of the West, and a lot of the streets are New York names. And so it's
Really?
There's some really interesting history here, and then obviously so much more to Waukesha. We mentioned the birthplace of Les Paul. It's the home of the state's oldest university here. It's the birthplace of the suffragette movement in Wisconsin. Many could argue with Theodore Youmans. It's because of her that Wisconsin was the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment, and just so much rich history locally that contributes to our American experience, and you could say even global experience with some of these innovations or influences that affect us during those formative years.
For sure.
Yeah, and I thought I kind of same thing with Orchard Park. I thought it was a very ecumenical community, and it was very, especially in our generation, where I think we were starting to, I hate to say the word assimilate, but we were starting to blend better as people from different backgrounds. And it was fun I shouldn't say fun, but it was interesting to be a part of that experience. So, and I think has this kind of shaped, has this shaped your involvement in the inclusion space and in the Truth in Common mission?
One thing that also occurred to me was my kids went to Quaker preschool as well,
Sidwell
which
Friends?
I didn't even.
Was it Sidwell? Oh, okay.
That's the fancier.
Yeah,
the fancier version.
Sure.
Private school up the street
Yeah,
where presidents send their kids,
Sure,
etc.
sure, yep.
So no, not that fancy. This is a little preschool in actually a Presbyterian church, but also with another campus in a meeting house. But it's Quaker.
Yeah.
My kids learn to use their words and such, and play bass and all of that. So, so there was that for sure. I mean, I think growing up in Orchard Park wasn't a terribly diverse place.
No.
Really, it was.
Yeah.
You mentioned kind of ecumenical blending, which I definitely agree with. I was Presbyterian, you were Catholic.
Yeah.
We didn't have much of a Jewish community, but we had the president of our, or the principal of our high school was Jewish. So
Right. Yeah.
I actually think that's a key piece, interestingly, that sent me on my
Right.
path as well, because I
Sure.
really sought out a college that was more diverse
Mhm.
and then had this kind of multicultural path ever since then. So I'm sort of a small town girl that kind of seeks out diversity and
Right.
loves different kinds of people and different
Sure.
kinds of viewpoints and backgrounds. So that had to come from, I also kind of gravitated to the kids that were different in town,
Yeah.
down the
Yeah.
street,
Sure.
the families, the couple of more diverse families in that street. So that had a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
Um, and that also kind of being in that space where helping organizations build more inclusive cultures,
Uh-huh.
just working on their organizational development,
Sure.
helped. I learned a lot about facilitating across difference,
Right. Right.
any kind of difference
Yeah.
that I bring into the truth and common kind of mindset. So that's why I
And that
really
is so
welcome
important in today's
all sorts
discussion.
of
Yeah.
folks
I'm really,
into the
yeah,
educational
sure. So
experiences.
in our when this conversation continues, I want to talk about some conversations I've had recently, and would love this would be a great chance for Deanna to weigh in on how we address or some of the skills I took from the workshop in terms of how I address some of these conversations that we had. And so
Nice.
much more. We're going to have a couple farmers market reports too in the second hour, so stick around for that. And then we're also going to be talking about your water, your local water. It's time to optimize your softener. So we'll talk about that and so much more here on This Week in Waukesha on this beautiful Saturday morning, where we don't have to wait for the sunrise.
Every little rosebud is covered with dew, and my heart is calling for you to thrush on.
The working, just the working life. Through the mansions of fear, through the mansions of pain. See my daddy walking through them factory gates in the rain. Factory takes his hearing, factory gives him life. The working, just the working life.
Hey, you're listening to This Week in Waukesha, and in honor of Labor Day weekend, that song is "Factory" from Bruce Springsteen from "Darkness on the Edge of Town," one of the great Springsteen albums, and great classic. I'm joined by my guest, communications expert strategist Deanna Troust, and talking about her nonprofit Truth in Common, and in addition to growing up in this quaint, community founded by Quakers that had real kind of a New England style feel to it, we also grew up in the shadows of the largest Bethlehem steel plant in the country, and once was a very thriving manufacturing sector there, and this primarily on the south side of Buffalo, and we've seen a lot of that manufacturing work go away for various reasons, but we also see a return in shall we say, organized labor in terms of there was like a record number of strikes in 2023, and not that we celebrate when that happens, but there is people that are fed up about a lot of the disparities in wage, especially my guest this Saturday to the day last year was from the Wisconsin's AFL-CIO, and she was talking about that there's like CEO compensation packages are like 870% higher than like a lot of skilled work. And yet we have a lot of these people that are working second and third jobs, couples that might be working, combined 5 or 6 jobs. And, what we're all really fighting for is just being able to be able to provide for our families, live in a home we can afford, in a nice neighborhood, good school, all those things. And, so it reminds me, if you get a chance, you can catch all these shows on our podcast. And there was Maggie Dawn during her show last week, had a guest. I think he was one of the Patriotic Millionaires. And he was talking about these disparities in executive salaries versus what the rest of us make. And there were some pretty reasonable solutions that are not in contrast with the capitalist system. I think that was from the Wednesday show. So check that out on Maggie Dawn. It was a really good conversation, again, with a very wealthy CEO that thinks that a lot of these salaries are just way too high. So, but returning to what Deanna's working on with her workshops. And then, I haven't forgotten. We're going to talk about what Max is doing at Labor Fest on Monday, where I know the vice president's appearing, and our own Earl Ingram's going to be broadcasting from there. So, but again, we'll keep a pin in that. Deanna, tell us about some stories from the workshop that you think are relevant, and then also too, like, kind of keep this in the back of your mind is like, where does a lot of this class struggle or this disparity in compensation, where we used to have such a big middle class, and now it just seems like it's narrowing, or there's just a bigger gap between the wealthy few and then the rest of us.
Yeah, for sure. I don't have any labor specific stories, but what comes to mind is libraries as resources that cut across all socioeconomic backgrounds. I can't tell you how amazing it's been to be just being present in libraries all over. So far the workshops are in person because we have a very relational approach. People get to know each other and they, connect with me. It's a trust building thing.
Yeah.
But just seeing all the resources that are available there. For example, we spend a lot of time talking about quality media and how people can connect with it. Well, you can go to your library and access media outlets that might have a steep price for subscription, have a paywall you can't quite get past, and that goes for your local outlets as well as national outlets that you may not be able to afford. So that's been incredible. And then just even working with the librarians, a lot of the kind of like games and exercises I work were developed by librarians. They're experts in connecting people with information. They are by nature nonpartisan, and it's not about them. It's about serving the public. So that's just a space that we would all be well to just sort of re-engage with in your community. Yeah. I bet you'll find stuff there that you love. But, in terms of stories from the workshops themselves, one that comes to mind is a conversation that happened at a Baltimore County. I'm doing a project with Baltimore County Public Library where we're doing workshops in 3 very different communities. Mm-hmm. And in one case, I have people curate the kind of falsehoods or the issues that sort of trigger them the most or really mean a lot to them.
Right.
And in this case, it happened to be my daughter who was talking with another individual who was self-disclosed as a Republican, and they had an amazing conversation about climate change. And I really encourage, this is not a debate, it's a listening session. So I encourage people to stem their emotional reactions in the moment and really listen to the other person and give them the floor. And she said her mind opened a bit in terms of why someone might doubt whether climate change is real or a hoax, for example. And then she was able to offer a piece, some input from, and this was like a great mom moment, from watching 60 Minutes, which we make the kids watch 60 Minutes every Sunday for forever. So she shared about coral bleaching, which was meaningful to the person she was speaking with. So these are the kinds people love, the conversational pieces, and we have stories like that all the time.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because we, when we would have dinner during the week, we had a small kind of dining area in our kitchen. We had a main dining, but we would eat during the week in this dining area in the kitchen, and it had a small TV where my mother would put the news on every night. Locally from 6 to 6:30, and then you had the national news. And that was great exposure and in the morning too, she'd put on the Today Show as we were getting ready for school, eating breakfast. And I wonder now in this age of like new technology and that if, I don't think our kids are getting that much local news or national news for that matter, and asking the questions. And go ahead.
Well, for sure. And I can share that a young person in my workshop just the other night asked the journalist who was presenting, who was from the local NPR and PBS combined organization that has both those affiliates under its roof, said, how do you connect with quality sources of information when you spend so much time on social media? This is quite a young person in the group.
Right.
And it was funny. This is what the odd reporter that's not on social media at all. But what we discussed, and I chimed in as well, was just following quality source of information on your social media platforms. They're on all the platforms. Okay. Engaging with them once or twice, like and comment once or twice. Sure. And then you at least have a prayer of seeing quality reporting
Yeah.
in your feeds to balance out all that other stuff. And then
Sure.
obviously we train people to be skeptical when they see all sorts of, YouTubers with a with a big microphone like you have, who are kind of spouting their own personal perspective, which is often partisan or not necessarily fact-based, and
Right.
having just a healthy degree of skepticism when you see sources that don't have a legitimate news organization behind them that has, obviously legitimate news organizations have trained researchers. There's kind of a lot of people doing their own research and sharing it out there as, God's truth. And
Yeah.
that can cause a lot of problems.
And so your workshops, they'll cut into that, or they speak to that, where it's like now news has become more entertainment, and it's just so biased towards one vertical or the other, whether it's Fox News on the right or MSNBC on the left, or QAnon on the very, very far right. Like, what are some of the specifics, kind of tips or strategies or tactics that you engage with to get people to evaluate that news, or to be open-minded to other news sources?
We teach, thanks for asking that we teach a technique called lateral reading, where if you come across a piece of content, a story that seems interesting, but you may want to check it out, which of course we encourage, you can, let's say it's from a outlet called, the example I use is an outlet called News Punch. Please don't, you don't really need to Google it. I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
You can open, rather than reading the story, we call it lateral because you can open up tabs on your browser where you actually vet News Punch. And if you did that, this little TikTok video put out by a librarian
Right.
that I share, that shows that, News Punch, if you look at Wikipedia, News Punch is actually an illegitimate, it's a, far right leaning, non-fact based outlet. And then there's other returns that say that it is a problematic non-fact based outlet. So you can kind of do the vetting of the source itself. So that's a really key technique. And then the other technique we talk about is curating your news via apps like the Google News app, where the way you get a variety of sources there is if you download that app, it's free. It may be influenced somewhat by your own search history, but still it's going to be a really easy way to seek a variety of sources. Because, for example, if something happens in your community, you can go to the story, one story about that happening, and go to the bottom where it says full coverage. If it's a big enough story, if you hit full coverage at the bottom of the screen there, I'm thinking even on your phone, you can see a variety of outlets covering that same story. And then you can see a variety of perspectives.
That's good. Yeah. And I remember, people used to encourage, we also grew up very close to the Canadian border, so we had access to the CBC news outlets out of Hamilton, Ontario, and it's great to see what other people are saying about America. Same thing with the BBC, which is very accessible to us, even more so now with today's technology in America. There's even a BBC America stream or channel, if you will, that you can get through most of your packages, and then a lot of people recommend The Economist as another great source.
For sure. Yeah, I completely agree. People are engaging less and less with even U.S. news, so probably even less so with global
Sure.
news. But outlets like The Guardian, to your point, the BBC, there's a great fact-checking resource at the BBC, and his first name is Cheyenne, and I'm just going to
wow.
get the last name wrong.
Sure.
But I follow him.
Yeah.
Platforms like Twitter and Threads are great for kind of curating and following individual reporters, and
Right.
Shai does an amazing job where he will,
Sure.
in a breaking news way, debunk certain falsehoods that are coursing about, like when things like the assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump happened.
Sure.
There was conspiracies instantly. Fake,
I
there
had some of
was
my own
inauthentic
even. Yeah.
content,
Yeah.
AI-driven content,
Yeah.
Photoshop content, you name it, and he'll go on and debunk that right away.
Sure.
And he's with the BBC.
With that being said, I'm curious to know, do you support the new feature on X using community notes?
Great question. So I signed up for community notes because I'm always looking for kind of projects that my communities can do, my groups, my Truth in Common groups can do together, because they always want to continue working together, and some of them want to volunteer. So I thought community notes would be a great way to do that. So I signed up, and quickly discerned that, in my perspective, it's almost more of a debate platform than it is necessarily a fact-checking platform. I definitely kind of support this notion of kind of crowdsourced citizen influence or citizen included fact-checking. But what happens is the community notes pop up for content that is not necessarily fact-checkable. It's someone's opinion. And that you may think, oh, you can fact check anything, but there are certain assertions that you just really cannot. And so it ends up people like kind of throw their own viewpoint in there. A lot of people do kind of fact-based countering in there when they issue a community note, but then there's a lot of people that just sort of use it as a kind of partisan opportunity to push back on someone's assertion. So it didn't seem all that helpful. I do respect the spirit behind it. I just don't think that is working the way it was necessarily intended. And there's so many falsehoods on Twitter overall now that it's kind of harmful content too, that it's the platform itself is kind of challenging. But great question.
You got it. And we'll have more questions for Deanna Traus of Truth in Common to answer regarding news outlets and even the fake news concept that our former president had introduced in his first campaign for president that merits some talking points, and so much more going on here, more local news and sports and culture here on this beautiful Saturday morning, August 31st. This week in Waukesha, WAUK 540 AM and the Civic Media app.
The work, and just the work in life. 'Cause it's the work, and just the work in life. It's only a whim, she thinks of him. Oh, how long will it take till she sees the mistake she has made? Dear, what can I do? Baby's in black and I'm feeling blue. Tell me how, what can I do?
Hey, you're listening to This Week in Waukesha with your host, Don Brown, here on WAUK 540 AM and the Civic Media app. And that was the Beatles with Baby in Black, a song you don't hear much of, but another great Beatles tune. And I play that because on August 29th, this week, back in 1966, the Beatles performed their last live concert to a paying audience at Candlestick Park. And Baby in Black was one of the songs that the Beatles played. And another note on this, John Lennon and Paul McCartney brought cameras on stage to shoot the crowd, unbeknownst to the crowd that this was the last Beatles live concert. So so much great history out there, and so much to share here in Guitar Town, USA. And I don't know if my guest Deanna Traus knew this, but Waukesha, Wisconsin is one of 7 Guitar Town USAs designated by Gibson Guitar. And so, of course, it's, you've got Chicago, you've got, of course, Nashville, all the great music cities, L.A., New York, Cleveland, where some say, rock and roll was first brought onto the radio by Alan Freed. And then of Chicago, again, with that great blues and jazz tradition. And I know I'm probably missing another city or two. And then there's Waukesha, Wisconsin, the home of Les Paul, Guitar Town, USA. So happy to celebrate that. And returning to the conversation with Deanna Traus, we were talking about news outlets and social media outlets and what you can trust and can't trust and how you should interpret the news that's being shared with you. And, what about NPR? NPR is often dismissed as this liberal news outlet, but one of my best friends from college, who was a pretty conservative Republican from Western Michigan, a farm community, his family was like 5th, 6th generation cherry producers, and he turned me on NPR, and it was a great source of news, especially for these local communities, these local rural communities, and it always gives you both sides or all sides of the argument. You always have like a one segment of a given news hour or show, you'll have somebody from the left giving their perspective, and then there's somebody from the right. Sometimes you'll have them on at the same time, but it was always, I thought it was more accurate. It was more, should we say, objective news reporting or sharing of information. And what about that? Is that still a great tool, a great weapon for people to use. Not to steer anybody away from Civic Media and WA, all the great stations we have here in Wisconsin, but it is a great news outlet.
I mean, for sure, NPR as a network is a nonprofit with a network of nonprofit outlets that cannot be partisan.
Yeah,
I mean,
and a lot
they
of the
just
foundations
can't.
that fund it are some of your most conservative, foundations out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a mix.
So,
So, and I definitely see a lot of crossover in terms of people who trust NPR right from the beginning when I did my first focus group
yeah,
in my parents' community in Pennsylvania to sort of help inform this initiative. Across the board, you would hear more people listening to their local NPR affiliate than otherwise. One thing that kind of you're raising NPR brings up for me that I think is important is who owns your news outlets is really important. So an NPR is a part of a larger network of nonprofits, as mentioned, but itself an independent nonprofit. So you don't have the kind of corporate agenda or
yeah,
a billionaire owner owning
yeah,
the outlet that may be getting his or her opinion in there, which is completely inappropriate.
yeah,
With that said, NPR outlets, your local NPR outlet likely
yeah,
needs your support, and we have to kind of get people back in the habit of, or at least embracing the fact that we do need to support this quality reporting. It's not free. The guy that I had on the other day covers democracy for WITF
mm.
in central
Small D democracy.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And that outlet has 3 reporters for 19 counties. So again, that kind of
a lot of
brings
ground to
into
cover.
focus.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah, yeah,
Brings into focus the importance of also the local news sources that cover those communities
yeah,
on a more hyper local level, and then NPR can speak a little more
yeah,
broadly to the region or that NPR affiliate. It's important to know that we have NPR overall, and then we have the
yeah,
affiliates all around the country. But the reach of those affiliates, to your point, into all kinds of communities is unlike any other network we
sure,
have. And
sure.
PBS is the same.
Yeah,
If you watch PBS
PBS
News
too.
at
Yeah,
night,
yep.
you will find that it is balanced.
That's right. We also used to watch the McNeil Lehrer News Hour, which was also really, and I think it was it. I always get the names wrong. Robin McNeil or Robin Lehrer. One of them was also one of the mediators in a lot of the presidential debates. So it was always great to see him there
Back in the day.
contributing. Yeah, back to the day. But our former president, who is the champion of fake news and a lot of very distasteful stuff we're seeing lately, and always a lot of hate-driven kind of dialect. Back in 2016, when he was campaigning, he referred to fake news a lot, and obviously he had his own agenda. But it does beg the question that a lot of the news we're getting from the national news outlets, that because they're being funded by advertising dollars, there'll be focus on, well, you could say are key issues, but then maybe some of the other basic issues important to us don't get that play. They don't get that airtime. Is that fair to say that in spite of former President Trump's rantings, that there is fake news out there that we've been listening to or reading or even accepting over the years, going back many years, even to like our youth in the 70s and 80s?
Right. Well, your sort of mentioning of those dynamics is, that sort of this notion of what is fake news, this term that kind of came into our vernacular, and even calling the mainstream media the enemy of the people back when is actually in large part why I got into this work, because as a communications strategist, I knew we would just have a big problem on our hands. And we do. So, I'd always worked with media as partners in the work that I did in social change. I've never done corporate work really, except for a few years in marketing
Okay.
at MCI, the defunct
Lucky you. I'm just kidding.
telecom organization. Yeah, that was it.
Oh.
And then I really went into more working with nonprofits and government entities and such with
Okay.
media as partners. So that was a large part of why I did that. And it's just been remarkable to me how kind of one person seeding that notion
Yeah.
has resulted in what I see all day long on my feeds, for example, which is people sort of,
Yeah.
trashing the media writ
Yep.
large.
So we're going to
all
talk
the
about
time.
what could have been an opportunity to have a more open dialogue has led to a really pointed dialogue and a lot of the hate information and spreading and fear mongering, and so much more to catch up on here as we head into hour 2 with Deanna Trauss, my guest from Truth in Common .org. And in the second hour, look forward to the Farmers Market Report, and we also have some beer garden updates. It is beer garden season here in Waukesha. So much more here on WAUK 540 AM and the Civic Media app. What can I do?
She thinks of him, and so she dresses in black. And though she Well, I'm coming face to face with my conscience.
August 31st, 2024. If it's 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, it's still time for This Week in Waukesha, Hour 2. I'm your host, Don Brown, coming to you live and local from the office of former Alderman Don Paul Brown here in the WAUK studios, right around the corner from Theodore Yaumans Park, where we are proud to honor our suffragette heritage here in the Shaw. I am joined again by my faithful companion, producer, the mighty Max Martinson. Hello, Max. And as always, in this hour two, we start with our first Farmers Market Report. Good morning, David. Are you there?
Don, it's Johnny Watermelon checking in with you this morning.
John Q. Watermelon. What's going on, dude?
Hey, brother, I just wanted to say hi and let you know what's going on down at the farmers market. There's just a plethora of great vegetables and fruits. Man, I'm seeing a lot of cool stuff today, like the colored cauliflower. All the tomatoes are in, and beans. I mean, it's just a fabulous. The selections are crazy here. And if you're in the doghouse like you are usually with Melissa, there's lots of flowers. So come on down, check us out, and you can spin the wheel at the Civic Media tent and win some great little certificates for local restaurants. And guess what else, Don?
What's that, Johnny?
I have the blueberry rhubarb crisp recipe from the information booth.
Sick.
And it's fabulous.
Yeah.
So come on down, man. Do some people watching, buy some great products, and stop and say hello to us at the Civic Media tent. This is Johnny Watermelon checking in with you live from WAUK 540 AM, 101.1 FM. Back to you, Don.
Thanks so much, Johnny Watermelon. Yeah, there may not be any watermelon there, but there will be watermelon at our Civic Media booth. So stop by and say hi to Johnny and David. Thought David was going to chime in. Thought David was solo, but no, Johnny Watermelon fills in. And Johnny's going to be out there with you, Max, at Labor Fest on Monday. And just real quick, for those of you who aren't as familiar, as I struggle to get my beamers off, that is Labor Day is a chance to remember those who made sacrifices for benefits many take for granted: weekends, worker protections, vacation, overtime pay, and the list goes on. It's a time to celebrate the power and stand together and the things that we can achieve together. And so the Milwaukee Area Labor Council, the AFL-CIO, put on the biggest festival on the Milwaukee lakefront that's free and open to the public. Starts with a parade at 11 that leaves Zeidler Union Square. And then from 11 to 5, Labor Fest takes place in the Henry Meyer Festival Grounds at 200 North Harbor Drive in Milwaukee. And I said Kamala Harris it's actually vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, will be there. And that will be fun. That would be, he's really taken the world by storm. It's really, no matter what your politics, you got to enjoy talking to a guy that was a teacher, an accomplished football coach, and a hunter, and a great husband and father. And he's got this thing for gutters. I don't know if you've been paying attention to that, Max, but he's his judge of someone's characters on how well they keep their gutters. So I hope he doesn't stop by my house there on Empire Drive. So, but anyway, it's made some fun to the political discourse that's going on here. So, and then again, with Discourse and with this election season, it's really a treat and an honor to have my longtime friend and communication strategist, Deanna Troust of Truth in Common here. And we've had a very productive first hour talking about the workshops that she puts on and how she helps people of all backgrounds learn how to translate disinformation and develops strategies for having better discourse with our neighbors, especially those that we disagree with. And where did we leave off again? I know we were talking about the political news outlets. Oh, yeah, just the concept of fake news that is one could argue is actually a very real thing even prior to Donald Trump, when a lot of the news we were getting from our national network outlets that are they're for profit and they're paid for by advertising dollars. So there's issues that may be important to us, especially at the local levels, that don't make it to the docket there, even on the local news, which is very troubling. And so, Deanna, if we could continue speaking to that, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. One thing we talked about in a workshop in Pennsylvania this past week was people, basically partisan networks of websites that are masquerading as quality news sources, but in fact are either, in some cases, abjectly fake, completely false information, AI generated or so on. That's called
Okay.
pink slime journalism. They sort of look like a legitimate news outlet with that kind
Pink
of
slime
typeface that looks
journalism.
like news.
Okay.
That's what it's called.
All right.
As a
I
reference
had to
like
the
repeat
that. So
pink slime and a hot, yeah.
yeah.
So completely fake, or news outlets that are masquerading as balanced, but in fact are very partisan, and you can kind of follow the money through to see. There was a great report by the Lemfest Institute and NewsGuard that identified a bunch of those websites in Pennsylvania. One, for example, is called the Lehigh Times, and it's sort of at face value. If you look at the website, it looks pretty legitimate. And then if you go down, you see it's sort of either proselytizing, a lot
Yeah.
of sort of religion-informed information masquerading as just straight up balanced news, or partisan kind of takes. So, if you lean the way that content is reflecting, it might feel good for you we call that confirmation bias, where we're seeking information or consuming information that reflects our existing viewpoints rather than that's objective. That might feel good to read that site, but it's been flagged as part of a broader network of sites that are really just designed to influence your viewpoint politically. And these are the kinds of things that we need to keep an eye out for. And there's so much, someone was also speaking in the workshop about just the fire hose of information.
Yeah.
It's hard, even if there was no bad actors involved, it would be very difficult to discern which of the news, sources that I trust and should follow. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people sort of manipulating those feeds for their own personal gain as well. And that's what we really coach folks on looking out for.
Yeah. I mean, there used to be a time when if America had a big win, regardless of who the president was or whoever the legislators were that were driving it, it was something we all celebrated together, even if we were like on opposite sides. And, a key example is a few years back, a lot of television programming was disrupted. President Obama had come on to announce that Osama bin Laden, I guess you could say the architect of 9/11, had been captured, I guess even like assassinated. And it was announced at like pro baseball games, and people were cheering, people from all different sides. And I know you don't want to cheer an assassinator, but just the fact that that there was an evil element that had been, you could say, brought to justice or whatever, or had been taken care of. And I think further back to when we were in 8th grade at Orchard Park Middle School, I had a teacher. He'd just come back from a sabbatical. I had a PhD for a social studies teacher named Dennis Igo, who also was a speechwriter for Jack Kemp, one of the great conservative icons in American politics, was then our congressman. And he was in one class we were talking about it was kind of a presidential history, and during the Carter administration he had mentioned the Camp David Peace Accord. And the portrait he had kind of painted with his words was a very nice tribute, saying that these are some warring tribes that have been going at it since the days of Moses. And Jimmy Carter brought them to the peace table. And the results of that Camp David treaty was there was some very tangible progress in the Middle East. And I know that from people that a family friend, her parents were diplomats and went to high school in Israel. And she witnessed it firsthand, this very tangible progress. And point I'm making too is that, again, you had this very, very right-wing conservative teacher throwing props to somebody on the other side that got something done. It did something very well. And what can we do to go back to that, where it truly is America first, or the world first, or whatever that is, spaceship Earth first, and then all the other, what your party is first or second, what your religion is, or what all that other stuff. Like I know that's a big question there, but it's also something you've been really doing deep dives in with your work throughout the years, and especially with Truth in Common.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I realized when, actually when we were doing the pilot with that you were involved with, when we were piloting the
Yeah,
Truth and Common approach,
sure.
I realized quite quickly that people really, it may not be mis and disinformation that keeps them up at night, although more and more so it is.
Yeah,
But what does, so to speak, keep them up at night is the polarization we're experiencing in
right.
our spaces. I mean,
Yeah,
people don't want to feel like they can't talk about real things without getting into some kind of conflict with people. People really hate that. So that's why I started to really hone in on the connection between mis and disinformation and polarization. Because if you think about even the assertions, harmful narratives, whatever, that have been
right.
then people have been pummeled with, even about particular people or groups,
Sure.
pick like fill in the blank, which party is
Yeah.
destroying America, for
Yeah.
example, often without backup because it's an assertion thrown out over social media and no one's reading more deeply and there may not be any backup at all. If you think about that, that's just sort of put us in these bunkers that people hate and are also, feel like it feels intractable, like that we can't really get out of it, but people really want to learn how, which is why in the third workshop we really get into dialogue about not just the weather, like about issues that people actually care about. And
Sure.
when we practice our listening skills, that's the key. I'm part of a coalition that you're welcome to Google, called the Listen First Coalition. That's over 500 organizations that are all trying to bridge partisan divides
Love
and
it.
dispel partisan animosity. And there's some great research in the space that shows
Sure.
that simply from Stanford, that shows that simply connecting with people whose viewpoints are different from yours.
Yeah.
Frankly, it doesn't matter what you talk about in
Right.
that moment.
Yeah.
Building that relationship, even on a very small level,
Yeah.
helps dispel, because you see, oh, this person really isn't evil or terrible, or
Yeah.
look, this person actually cares about our country as well.
Yeah.
So that in and itself goes a long way. So that's why we welcome all the viewpoints to the
It
workshop.
is called the Listen First Coalition was the recommendation.
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And Truth
Thanks
in
for
Common
that.
is a member,
Yeah.
and there's tons. So if you go on there, you can if you actually look at that coalition or look at some of the feeds or look any of them
Okay.
up, you'll see tons of people working on this in
Sounds great.
communities across the country, even in the
Okay.
globe. So
Terrific.
there's a lot of hope there.
All right. Yes.
But it's pretty tough right now. And unfortunately, those divides are going to be exacerbated in the next several months, if not versus
This will be a very
reverse.
crucial
But,
time. Yeah.
really, it will be difficult, but it could be also
Okay.
a time for people
Good
to
deal. Okay. So
reconnect afterwards.
we're going to continue this conversation with Deanna Troust here in This Week in Waukesha. And the resident attorney for the Office of Former Alderman Don Paul Brown, James Santel, has just walked in preparing for his show, Atticus, which is next. And so much more here on this beautiful Saturday morning, August 31st, 2024.
Help you can. I know that you can. Talk about it. Talk about it. Oh, give it up. How many dreams remain? This is a feeling too strong to contain. The hardest years, the darkest years, the roaring years, the fallen years. These shall not be forgotten years. The hardest years, the wildest years, the desperate and divided years.
We will remember. Hey, you're listening This Week in Waukesha, and that, of course, is Forgotten Years by one of my favorite bands, Midnight Oil, whose lead singer, I think his name is Peter Garrett, really active in Australian politics throughout his life, holding leadership roles in their government. And again, my guest here is Deanna Troust of Truth in Common. And we've seen this a lot more, where music and politics are kind of blending together, or where musicians are speaking out, or whereas in past, as entertainers, they chose to remain neutral, obviously, because you don't want people not going to your concerts. But a lot, in spite of that, a lot of them are making stands. And do you think can music play a positive role in terms of developing a truth in common for of us, or developing a better discourse, or do you think it does continue to maybe alienate and polarize?
Well, what's great? That's a great question. What's great about music is we have such an emotional reaction to it.
Yeah.
And if you think about what uh, what prompts us to engage with inaccurate content is often our emotional reactions to that content.
Yeah.
So there's sort of you could sort of extrapolate and say, well, let's balance out the emotional reactions that we feel to content. For example, if a piece of content on social media makes me mad, I'm that much more apt to share it because I'm going to react in a moment to that emotional reaction.
Yeah, I'll just hit the X.
And that emotional reaction kind of comes from the way my
Yeah.
multiple identities as a person.
Sure.
So if you think about positively countering that with music, which also sparks an emotional reaction in us, it's a pretty good idea. I have long felt that multimedia content overall is a great way to teach.
Yeah.
So which I kind of steer people to documentaries. I steer people
Sure.
to podcasts like Mission Implausible is this amazing podcast with these two former CIA guys.
Really?
So, yeah, amazing. And they will dazzle you with stories of conspiracies because they were in the conspiracy business actually kind of for a while, counterintelligence
Right.
wise.
Yeah.
But yeah, super interesting. So, yeah, it's a great point. I have thought from time to time, in fact, inspired by your great playlist today, that we should come up with a good, kind of truth supporting playlist. Put it on our
Yeah.
website.
Yeah. That could be a good fundraiser. Come up with
Put that on the list.
get approval and come up with an album or like a CD you could sell at the holidays. So, yeah.
And I bet just like there are community members who are super passionate about sorting through all these falsehoods and getting rid of them, as if that's possible. But,
Right. Yeah.
There's certainly musicians in that sphere too.
Sure.
No doubt.
Sure.
It'd be interesting to find them for sure. I'll have to get on my influencer marketing,
Yeah. There you go.
bandwagon.
Hey, just taking a quick local break here to let you know it is time to optimize. If you're still using your water softener, it must be optimized by January 1st, 2025. A full optimization service call includes adjustment of the hardness, salt dosage, and reserve capacity settings by an approved optimizer company. So far as a community, we reduced chlorides in the water by about 100 mgs per liter. I think that is. The goal is the reduction of 250 mgs per liter. If you would like to dispose of your softener, you can do so at no charge until April 1st, 2025 by calling 262-369-3080. Again, 262-369-3080. And the salt bin must be empty and the softener placed at the street. So some helpful news. And I don't know if you're aware of this, Deanna, but Waukesha has become the first and maybe perhaps the only non-coastal city that uses Great Lakes water. And as of this time last year, it was installed and it was a major project. And I know we're going to spend many years paying for it, but the end result is we get to drink water out of our taps for the first time in probably 30 years. And
amazing.
The water through our systems, we're returning it back to Milwaukee, where the Lake Michigan water came from, cleaner than it was when we first got it. And the hope too is that it also becomes a hub for economic development for a lot of companies that rely on water, manufacturers and whatnot. And I'd also love to see more development of a thriving aquaculture industry, so that there's greater access to responsible seafood purveyors. So yeah, something you didn't know. Yeah.
I love that about your water system. I live in Washington, D.C. We can't really drink from the tap. So we've just gotten out of that habit. It's very sad. But I was just in Italy over the summer where the Romans were known for their aqueducts. So there's, we would go up to these little tiny mountain towns. We were cycling around Tuscany.
Oh, wow.
And we would go to these little mountain towns that had these free spigots that where you could just access free municipal water, and the same thing even downtown in Rome.
Okay.
It was really cool. And it felt like, gosh, why doesn't everyone do this thing?
Yeah.
Props to the Romans.
Yes. How about it? So now returning to our conversation, we were talking about, what were we talking about again? Where did we leave off? But anyway, I guess, we jump back into these workshops and we're talking about addressing polarization and how people, because that's the other thing I've found is that no matter what kind of metrics based or evidence based material you provide people you're debating, they are still married to this concept. And again, oftentimes
Right.
it's fed by hatred, it's fed by fear, it's fed by
Exactly.
the news outlet, the news that they're trusting or that they're believing. And get like how do you get around that? I know you mentioned too that if you can approach issues that we all agree on, things that are most important to us, that at least you can build a base.
Right. Well, I guess the sort of main message there is that you're not going to really convince someone by spewing facts all the time.
Yeah.
What really motivates folks is personal stories. So we teach personal stories and stories overall. So we teach
Sure.
people to kind of, as in dialogue, use I statements.
Okay.
So you're not saying they do this, they do that, making generalizations. You're saying, in my experience, et cetera. And that
Right.
allows you to say
Sure.
what your sources are.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So really, and that's why our workshops are super relational and connecting people, and people love that.
Okay. But do personal stories also shape that worldview in a way that's tough to, like I had a conversation recently with someone that's a nurse, and she was talking about all the illegal aliens that she's working with, giving the, the pregnancy test or I forget the test, God, where's my brain this morning? But she was talking about
The COVID test?
Not the COVID test, but just like when you're doing the X-ray of the baby and in the mother's womb and the whole, like you can see it and
Like the ultrasound.
Thank you. She does ultrasounds. Yes.
Right. Okay.
And she was upset because they're just overwhelmed with a lot of these what she's calling illegal expatriates, and that and I forget but she just said it was very overwhelming for the care network that she's in.
Yeah.
And
I hear that.
and again, there's that well, why we can't take care of everybody. We have to take care of ourselves first. Or there's all this, or these people are, they're drug mules, or they're part of a human trafficking ring or something that's coming up from the South, which was interesting to me because human trafficking to me seems like it's always come from the East or the West, especially the East, in terms of the sex trafficking and that, that awful trade. And so, but you're saying these personal stories though can actually be more eye-opening or enlightening, or can open up a dialogue for inclusion.
When in
Travel along the white cliffs of Dover, many rivers to cross, and it's only my will that keeps me alive. I've been licked, washed up for years, and I merely survive.
You're listening to This Week in Waukesha, and that is the great Jimmy Cliff with Many Rivers to Cross, another timely classic in this election season. But first, we have our second call. Oh, is he still there? From Johnny at the farmer's market? I don't see him on the... Did we lose him? Okay. Well, maybe he'll call back. Is he there? No? Okay. Well, maybe we'll get Johnny again. It is a great day to go to the farmer's market. I'm anticipating with people going out of town. It may not be so busy, but it could also be busy with people doing their party planning there at the farmer's market. So many great opportunities, so much fresh produce. And before I continue with my guest, Deanna Troust with Truth in Common, I'd be remiss if I did not let all of you know that the next stop in the Waukesha Beer Garden season is Merrill Crest, the Merrill Crest Park for our neighborhood beer gardens at 616 South University Drive on September 5th to the 7th. The hours are 5 to 9 on Thursday the 5th, 5 to 9 on Friday the 6th, and 3 to 9 for Saturday the 7th. And I would imagine if you're a Waukesha South Black Shirt fan, you'd want to catch that Friday offering, because Thursday night you'll be at the watching the Black Shirts playing against Tosa West and their Parkland Conference owner. And I guess Johnny's back. Poor old Johnny Watermelon. Go ahead, Johnny.
Hey, Hey, Don, good morning. How you doing?
Never been better, Johnny. It's a beautiful day here on this Labor Day weekend, Saturday.
I'll tell you, what a great weather kind of scenario we got kicking off here at the Farmers Market. People are starting to really file in here. There's all kinds of different produce and fruits and flowers. I mean, the flowers are all over the place, man. Artisan breads. I love this farmers market. It's a great place to people watch. We're right down here next to the Waukesha State Bank. And you can stop by at the Civic Media tent where David and I are. We just gave away a great certificate to the Delafield Brew House. And there's lots of other certificates that you can win here. So please stop on down to the WAUK Civic Media booth and say hi and get a chance to win a great prize.
That sounds great. Yes, thank you, Johnny. And Johnny will be working with Max over at Labor Fest on Monday, where Governor Tim Walz is expected to speak. And Johnny's also going to be helping us out with Waukesha Unlocked on October 12th, 13th. WAUK will be part of that, and it's backed by popular demand. It's Saturday and Sunday, the 12th and 13th of October from 10 to 4. And basically the doors, the city basically opens the door to businesses, organizations, churches, and city buildings. And you can really participate in a lot of fun things. Like the Waukesha Booster Pumping Station, the Clean Water Plant. There's a downtown Waukesha food tour. There's a fee for that one. There's tour at Ray's Grain Brewing Company, a tree walk and basic tree identification watercolor, a walking history tour, which I'm really big on, and a Springs historic bus tour, which I think is very, very cool. Visit the Waukesha Unlocked website. You can sort by pre-registration to find these sites and sign up. You know, there's also going to be like the STEM schools are going to have, there's going to be a drone demonstration and some other fun things that the kids are working on. La Casa de Esperanza will have dancing and drum performances and really so much more. What started as a one-off during our sesquicentennial celebration about 3 years ago was so well received that the people want more. And I highly encourage you all to come and check that out. So I'm back here with Deanna Troust of Truth in Common. And I know Deanna had to take a moment to recharge the batteries, like a race car driver had to make a pit stop. And so we're good to go, Deanna?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great. Thank you. So,
Okay, awesome.
and so, yeah, we were continuing this conversation about how we can use personal accounts, personal stories to help open up a more accepting or a more inclusive, or shall we say, understanding dialogue, especially with people that were maybe diametrically opposed to politically. And so, yeah, wanted to continue next. As I'd mentioned, my fear is that when I'm talking to people that use those personal instances, that shapes their worldview, perhaps in a negative way. But you're saying there's actually there's some good tactics that open up a more open-minded dialogue. If I may be redundant.
Right. Well, the example that you shared of the nurse, the sonogram nurse who was servicing a lot of recent immigrants to the U.S. I'm assuming they were recent. So her personal experiences throughout her life frame her perspective. But what is sort of estimated is the influence of the narratives that she's seen for now. I mean, if you think about toxic narrative, I mean, there's been narratives about immigration, for decades,
Yeah.
but they've really dialed up in a partisan way of late. So, while you might have a certain experience with people in your workplace, you go home and see all sorts of narratives about harmful narratives, sort of some often false, but often sort of politicized narratives
Right.
about immigrants. That's going to shape your worldview. And I can't say which is more impactful. Obviously,
Sure.
your personal experiences
Sure.
mean a lot, but that's going to impact your worldview as well. And unfortunately, immigration is the thing that is being politicized more than
Sure.
really anything in this particular race and in the last 8 years.
Well, upon further review, I do see if someone has a personal account that has a positive outcome, especially if it's a coworker that's an expatriate, or maybe even a family member that's an expatriate. And I always dwell on my own family experience as well as my years working in the restaurant business, where in Chicagoland, there is a huge influx of expatriate labor, primarily from Mexico, and it's these people I had some of the best work experiences with, and we're just great citizens and great people, great family people. I mean, just all the things you'd want in a neighbor or a coworker, and so that's shaped my worldview, especially given the fact that my father's family hasn't been in this country very long, and there was a certain amount of shame growing up. My dad was like that from that Donald Draper generation of the 50s and 60s, where you were trying to shed that immigrant skin or that non-American skin, like where you came from, and it was all about you're Americans now, and that was always hard for me to deal with, because it's like you want to know about your past, you want to know about your identity, and so I guess that's always been my approach, and I think that helps maybe influence people in a positive way and helps them think back to, like, where did your people come from? How did they get here?
Exactly.
There's a very good chance that maybe they didn't get here legally or illegally, and I think back to my mother's people who came here in the 1840s, and they didn't come here to pursue the American dream. They came here to get lunch. There was a famine. Millions of people were starving to death. And so it's like, and it really wasn't that long ago, when you look at it in context to overall history. And so I always try to encourage people from all sides to, like, kind of explore your own family's history here. And
Exactly.
I just heard the other day about Donald Trump, about his ancestor had come here illegally from Germany, and he tried to repatriate, tried to return to Germany in like 1905, and they wouldn't accept. They exported. He was illegal. They exported him, or they deported him, whatever that word is. But a German born, someone who was German born, was once a citizen, left to the U.S., came back. I don't know how many years later, but they wouldn't accept him. So rather ironic, I think.
Totally. We all have immigrant histories here.
Yeah,
We do. I mean,
Sure.
my husband is first generation American. His parents were Cuban, came
Okay.
here when Castro. I mean, talk about.
yeah,
I get very worked up when I
Oh,
hear
yeah.
people claiming that other people are communists in this country,
Yeah.
because I just say, look, talk to my father-in-law. He'll tell you about communism. Okay, so stop.
yeah,
But there's also so obviously the harmful narratives about immigrants hit home for me, and I actually
Yeah.
use that example in
Sure.
the workshop.
yeah,
My kids are bilingual. They, one of them would say I'm a Latina. The other one is
Yeah.
kind of, because they're half and half.
yeah.
You either gravitate to certain parts of your identity.
Sure.
So we all definitely have immigrant histories, and the harmful narratives about immigrants themselves
Yeah.
are really hit home for me, given my family's heritage.
Sure.
And there's a lot of confusion about what, I hear a lot of times I hear, immigrants are fine as long as they come here legally. Well, this notion of asylum seeking is just very poorly understood.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
I'm not an expert on immigration, but I
Sure.
certainly see the narratives, and I'm part of threat assessment
Yeah.
groups that track those narratives and so on, and they can be quite harmful. With that said, we do have obviously we have a problem with the number of people, with a system for processing the number of people that want to come here, and their countries have a lot of
Yeah.
problems that send them here as well. So it's a very complicated issue, like a lot of the things that
Sure.
that spark falsehoods and mis and disinformation.
Yeah.
But personal experience can obviously
Yep.
help cut through it in many ways, as can having a bit more of an open mindset, not taking those harmful narratives at face value.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you make an interesting point too when you bring up the communists. There was a time when we were growing up and in the Cold War where, if you even if someone found out you went to see the Russian ballet, they questioned your patriotism because they were, you're a commie, or you're, and then you fast forward to today, and it's you try discussing with anyone from the right side of the pro-Trump people about this really cozy relationship he has with Putin and the Russians, and there's no they don't reconcile that with the years of the Cold War and this mistrust and this whole we're here in Wisconsin. You think of that McCarthy era and maybe a dark time, but people were concerned about communists infiltrating our government and about pro-Russian communists in particular, since it's really, I guess you couldn't call it Marxist communism. But anyway, like how it's interesting how that dialogue has changed, that history's almost been erased in terms of understanding the adverse relationship with Russia.
I know. Well, again, influenced very strongly about, by people who have a strong control over the social media
Yeah.
landscape
Yeah.
and will seed, there's obviously personal gain in seeding, I guess, a more empathetic view toward
Yeah.
Russia, personal political gain.
Yeah.
And yeah, every time I see it, it kind of cuts to my core too. And a lot of it is generational too. I mean, we lived through the Cold War, and a lot of people, younger folks
Yeah.
didn't, but it is certainly a part of our history that people would be wise to remember. And of course, the
Yeah.
irony too is that Russian influence has been key in a lot of the
Yeah.
harmful narratives that we see
Yeah.
causing they
Yeah.
have been meddling in our information feeds since 2016 and continue to
That
do
too.
so. And
Yeah.
now we're seeing instances with Iran. China's trying, not doing a great job, but
Yeah.
so foreign powers are definitely, and this is
Yeah.
where that podcast Mission Implausible is super great.
Yeah. And so,
Foreign powers are messing with us on
yeah.
social media, and it's very easy to do so, and
Yeah.
people are falling for it.
So-
It's very tragic.
It brings me back to two examples real quick, and I'll try to be, because I know we're near a break. But when I was on the council, there was, in one city council meeting, there was a 3-hour discussion over a $70,000 project involving a dam at a local park, and people were very emotional about that. A lot of big turnout, a lot of public comment. But then after that, there was a $13 million thing on the table about renovating one of our parks, a beautiful Buckner Park I'm talking about, and that was voted for and approved in like 15 minutes. And the previous vote about the park, it went to a tie, and the mayor cast the deciding vote in favor of the Parks Department, which upset a lot of the neighbors. But the point being is that $70,000 project versus a $13 million project, which have an impact on your taxes. And it brings me back to this immigration. I don't think anybody coming through the southern border has the ability to bring about nuclear devastation to the extent that Putin and the Russians can, or us as the Americans. And so it's that emotional attachment we have to certain issues that really, affects the conversation. So we're going to continue this discussion with Deanna Traus here in the last segment, and also about opportunities her and I are pursuing together to bring Truth in Common to Waukesha, to the Milwaukee area. So lots to talk about here as we close things out, and on this beautiful Labor Day weekend on WAUK 540 AM.
Yes, I got many rivers to cross, but I can't seem to find my way over. Yes, and how many years can a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? Yes, and how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Hey, we're back in This Week in Waukesha on WAUK 540 AM and the Civic Media app, and my guest, Deanna Traust of Truth in Common. We're going to jump right into election-related disinformation and what to do about it. Go ahead, Deanna. The floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. A focus of the organization this year, meaning Truth in Common, is to really focus in on the falsehoods that have been spread about our electoral processes. As you know, there's been tons of sort of frivolous investigations into electoral processes ever since 2020.
Michael
A
Gableman.
lot. Sorry?
I was mentioning Michael Gableman, Wisconsin.
Right. I know you've had one yourself.
A
You're
waste of
in a
millions of tax
battleground
dollars.
state.
Yeah.
Exactly. So in Truth in Common educational experiences, we've been all year sort of drilling down on that particular aspect. And what we do is sort of elevate those falsehoods that have been spread in the location. For example, in Pennsylvania, we talk about this narrative that kind of came about that there were somehow more votes in Pennsylvania than there were voters in 2020. And due to some great investigative reporting, they've uncovered the very person who seeded that narrative through, someone who started out as genuinely curious and saw something that she thought was inappropriate or just had a suspicion, but then went to do her own research and is not a professional researcher, used publicly available data, but wasn't a skilled researcher, and came up with all sorts of assertions that were then, sort of right away debunked, but now has started not one, but two organizations that are working to discredit elections in the state and even beyond. So there's tons of these kinds of efforts, unfortunately. So one thing we do in our workshops is really share examples that are relevant to the community where we're speaking, just so people have a heads up. Again, getting back to this notion of pre-bunking, meaning, look, here's the narrative that came about. And what's going to happen in November, we can be pretty sure that, for example, if there's a mistake, because mistakes are made in elections, they're perfect. There's human error in any process where there are humans, and we have hardworking election workers and volunteers and so on.
Yeah.
So, but if something like a printer breaking down happens in your local, frankly, no matter where you are, but especially in a battleground state, it's going to be turned into claims of fraud almost instantly. I would almost put money on that happening.
Sure.
So any mistake is going to be turned in claim of fraud. There's a lot of people sort of working to put on the ground resources in place to help dispel those kinds of fraud falsehoods in the moment. But the falsehoods travel much more quickly than the fact checks can on social media. So it takes kind of each of us being aware of, hey, there's going to be claims of fraud to come. A lot of them are going to be partisan oriented with a political agenda seeded for that reason, and just to be aware. And one resource that you Wisconsins have, and that I don't know if people know about, is on your Wisconsin Elections Commission website is a page, and it's accessible through the homepage of the Election Commission, a page on Wisconsin fact checks. So it goes through falsehoods like, does Wisconsin have duplicate voter registration numbers? And if you click on that, no, all Wisconsin voter registration numbers are unique. And like all fact checks, it sort of gives you the receipts as to how that's been disproven.
Nice.
So election boards everywhere are spending a whole lot of time debunking these falsehoods. Let me tell you, they're not equipped to do that in many cases. But then you have organizations like, your boards like in Wisconsin that are doing so and have it publicly available. In Maryland, we actually have a website that helps you can report election-related disinformation that you see on the election board website. So go to your local election board. County and state is where it matters. The Waukesha County and then the Wisconsin State Elections Board are really the players here, and they both have really high-quality websites.
Yeah. I think that's great. That's an education to me, and I appreciate that and sharing that, because it's still you're dealing. There's a lot of people I respect that believe that the election was fixed in 2020, and I was challenged when I was on the council by a constituent to look at the 2020 election, and here's what I come up with, and again, this is fact based. This is evidence based. Joe Biden's margin of victory in Milwaukee County, very blue county, of course, was 0.8% higher than Hillary Clinton's was in 2016. Donald Trump's margin of victory in Fire Engine Red, Waukesha County, where it's Republican influence or controlled, was 5% lower than it was in his victory over Hillary Clinton in 2016. There's your margin. There's your difference. And also when you go to Dane County, where in 2016 a lot of pro-Bernie liberals did not vote for Hillary in protest, or didn't vote at all. And they came out in 2020 when they saw that, what shall we say, the error of their ways. And so the numbers are there. So I don't understand why people would still think that this was stolen. And again, you're seeing these stories all over the country and in Georgia. And we all heard a phone conversation in which the former president was basically bullying these state officials with Georgia to come up with 80,000 more votes or whatever that was to make up the margin or the difference of his defeat there. And so, anyway, go ahead. What is, because
Oh,
we have
I
like
don't-
2 minutes left. Tell us what we haven't
Yeah.
talked about already here real quick.
Well, I mean, just on your last comment, I don't care. I really don't care what your politics are. We have
Right,
to
same
have
here.
safe and secure voting processes.
Yes.
That is what democracy is all about.
Yeah.
So we're able to, remain nonpartisan
Yep.
and still focus in on this reality, because we can't
Yeah.
have people disenfranchised about not being able to vote, and we can't have our voting processes discredited
That's
just
everything,
because
yeah.
of someone's political gain.
So here in our
So
final minute, I
follow
want to
your
thank
elections
I want to
board.
thank you for joining us, Deanna. And we also, her and I are petitioning Waukesha Public Library System, and I'm also going to reach out to Carroll University about having Truth in Common come here to do a workshop. And if you're interested, just reach out to me or visit our website, truthincommon.org. Thanks again for joining us, Deanna Traus, Truth in Common. Have a great Labor Day weekend, everybody. Please remember, safety is everyone's responsibility. James Santel is on next with Atticus. Ugora Mil Mahagav Galer, and see ya!
Yes, and how many ears must one man have before he can hear people cry? Yes, and how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in